everyone. This is a video where I'm going to show you how to make a meal that is very, very well liked in my family, and it's called 30-minute almond chicken. Now this meal cooks within 30 to 45 minutes depending on how thick and how defrosted your meat is. And if you don't like chicken, you can substitute shrimp or pork or beef for it, or you can leave the meat out altogether if you're vegetarian as well. Now, I have all the things here you're going to need to make the meal, and again, you can substitute certain things within the meal in and of itself. Now, first thing you're going to want to do is put 1/4 cup of Italian dressing in a sealable plastic bag with the meat, whatever meat you choose, into a resealable plastic bag and shake it thoroughly. Now, if you don't like Italian dressing or you don't have Italian dressing, you can substitute cooking oil with herbs or wine. Now, keep in mind, number one, with the wine, you want to make sure you're going to use a wine that you would drink. That is one of the big things with cooking, is if you're going to cook with wine, cook with the wine you would drink. Number two, if you're going to substitute the wine, make sure that you're substituting a wine that would go with the meat you're cooking with. So for the chicken, you would want to use a white wine. For beef, a red wine. For pork, I think white wine as well. Pork does tend to be a white meat. For seafood, your call. You can use red or white. I prefer white with my seafood, but if you like red wine with your seafood, you can go with that too. Okay, so this chicken is very well mixed in the Italian dressing. So we are going to put it into the skillet. Now, I like to use a wok for this because everything else you put in there is going to get pretty high. So you're going to want to use a skillet that has nice high sides. That was a mistake I made the first time I did this, is I used a regular frying pan and it just was too small to accommodate everything. So we're going to put the dressing and the meat, in this case chicken, into the skillet. We're going to want to make sure we get all that dressing in there. I am using chicken and Italian dressing because that is what the recipe calls for. Again, you can substitute any meat you want, and you can substitute cooking oil and herbs or wine if you want. You can hear that Italian dressing sizzling. Now we're going to want to let that meat cook for about 4 minutes per side. So I'm going to set my kitchen timer for 4 minutes. And I forgot to get out my flipper, so I'm going to get that. And a spoon for mixing, because I'm going to want a spoon later on. There is that. You want that. Now you can hear the Italian dressing just sizzling in that. In the fry pan. So you can tell it's really cooking good. Got put on the other side. Okay, now I got this recipe off of All Recipes, which is an app on my phone that I do look through periodically to try and find recipes to cook with. Or not cook, but to cook. So this recipe is actually from there. It's not something I made up on my own. So if you want to get this recipe, it is on there if you have it. If not, You can go to Google. Google Play definitely has it. Apple may have it as well. I don't know. I don't have Apple on my phone because my phone is through Google. I will have this recipe also. I will have everything from the ingredients you'll need and how much to the step-by-step instructions to how much it serves in the description section as well. So don't worry about having to write everything down as I'm saying it. You can just look in the description section at your leisure and write it down there because everything will be right there. Now keep in mind please that this recipe actually serves 8. I am going to give you the parameters for the serving of 8 even though I'm just cooking for myself. Mainly because I do like rice, the rice and the chicken broth and the green bean mixture, and I actually think it's really good. And once you see it done, it doesn't really look like a lot. But keep in mind you can add and subtract as need be. Just keep in mind with the rice and the broth, you are going to want to make sure that you're doing those in equal proportions, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you can hear that Italian dressing, just probably hear it now because I'm moving it around a little bit. You can hear it cooking really well, and I can smell that Italian dressing as it's being cooked, and let me tell you, it smells really good. Now, if you make any changes to this recipe by personal choice, let me know in the comment section, like what you substituted for what and how it turned out, like whether you liked it or not, or whether it wasn't too good. Again, I have not done any substitutions for this recipe. I always cook it as is. I may just add or subtract the proportions, but I've never substituted the Italian dressing for anything, and I've never, ever substituted any other kind of meat, and I've never substituted the broth. But if you choose to, feel free and just let us know how it turns out in the description section. Okay, so I flipped that over because it came to 4 minutes, and we're going to let the other side cook for 4 minutes. And while that's cooking, we're going to get the next set done. Okay, so while that's cooking, while the other side's cooking, I'm going to get the next thing done because that kind of makes it go quickly, is the more you get set up. So I'm putting the broth in here. And I'm going to need about 1.5 cups of chicken broth, and that's for the 8 serving. If you don't want to do that much broth, you don't have to. If you wanted to, you can subtract some or you can add some. And I am sticking with what the recipe calls for because I actually like the mixture that you do with the broth and the almonds and the rice and the beans. Okay, while that's also cooking, I'm going to get the cover out because I forgot to do that. Sorry, I tried to have everything set. There's just a couple of things I kind of forgot I needed. Okay, so again, we got the chicken is cooking very nicely. You can probably hear it sizzling. And again, this is not going to be completely cooked at this exact moment. You're just browning it right now to kind of lock in the wherever you mixed it with in the back. So what you're doing is searing it, and that's going to lock in the flavor of the dressing or the oil and herbs or the wine that you mixed it in with it while it was in the bag. So that's all you're really doing here. You are going to cook it once everything else is in there, with the exception of the rice and the almonds. But right now we're just searing it to kind of lock in that flavor. And again, I can smell that Italian dressing cooking, and I'm sure you can hear that meat sizzling in the saucepan, and we're getting some smoke here, which isn't good, but I mean, it's good, but it's not bad. I mean, you're going to get a little bit of smoke from when you cook. That's just kind of what happens. As long as it's not like big plumes of smoke, we're fine. Well, also, you just really, when you're cooking it, it's 4 minutes or on either side or until brown. I go 4 minutes because then, like, it's not really going to hurt anything to go less than 4 minutes. Okay, now we're going to add in the chicken broth. You're going to want 1.5 cups of chicken broth, or if you're substituting another kind, if you're substituting pork broth, or if you're substituting beef broth. And if you're substituting shrimp, or you're not doing meat at all, you're going to want to do a vegetable broth. But you're going to want to do the same amount that you're using for the rice for the chicken. You can put that in there, and we're going to bring that to a boil. So we're going to want that to come to a nice boil, and we're going to want to mix it around real good to kind of get whatever was burned on from the dressing or the wine or the oil mixed in with the chicken, with the broth. And we're going to want to wait for that to boil. I'm actually going to flip this chicken so it's got broth on both sides, so it's like completely covered in the broth. I'm going to move it around a little bit so it can get completely covered in the broth and have like a nice broth bath. So it's like got that nice, it's like infused with the chicken broth to a degree, a little bit. Just be careful when you're doing this that you don't touch the side of the pans of the skillet. It will be very, very hot. And any kids, if you're making this, please make sure you have an adult help for the really hot stuff. Okay, so we're going to let that come to a boil. And while that's coming to a boil, I'm going to open up this thing of green beans because we're going to need that relatively soon. I'm starting to see some bubbles, which is good. That means it's boiling. I'm trying not to watch it because you know what they say, a watch pot never boils. Get that in the sink so I can wash it later. Okay, and that's at a nice boil, so I'm going to cover it with the one-size-fits-all lid that we have, and I'm going to let that simmer for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to set my trusty kitchen timer to 10 minutes. And while that's doing, I'm going to get the beans ready. You're going to want to use green beans. I have never substituted another vegetable for it, for the green beans, and I don't think you really can. I am using canned green beans because for several reasons. Number one, I can look at the can and know exactly how much I'm going to be using. Each can is about 1/2 cup. You're actually supposed to use about, for 8 people, 2 cups of green beans, so 4 cans. I'm only going to use 2, so I'm only going to use about 1 cup of green beans, just because I can't eat 2 cups of green beans, even with everything else. And you're going to want them cut or trimmed and halved, which is another reason why I'm using the canned green beans, because they are already trimmed and halved So I don't have to really worry about that prep-wise. Now, if you want to use fresh green beans, by all means, you can use fresh green beans. And if you want to use frozen green beans, if you've got a bag of frozen green beans and you can get two cups, 2.5 cups, 1 cup, half a cup, enough for the recipe, for this recipe, out of it, by all means, you can use the frozen green beans if you want to use them up. Hi, Chloe. Chloe's saying, no, I like it when you use the canned green beans, even though I don't get to eat this meal. But again, I'm using canned green beans just because it's a little easy. Would be easier if this can opener would work. It's just a little easier I know exactly how much I'm putting in there. I don't have to measure anything, and they're already trimmed and halved for me. If I could just get this stupid can opener to work. Ah, there we go. Sorry, it's an old can opener. It works when it kind of wants to, kind of like old things. They just kind of work when they want to. Okay, so I got that one open, and we're going to drain off the water. Sorry, Chloe. I know she's very, very vocal. I fed you. Okay, now you want to work. Okay, I must have just not had it clamped down enough. There we go. Got the other one good open. Drain off that water. Okay. How's that looking? Oh, that's looking very good. We got that broth that's getting nice and brown, which is what we want. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that right there. I'll put everything away when I'm done. Well, I guess I can put the Italian dressing away now because it should stay cold. Okay, so we got the Italian dressing put away. Probably put the broth away too because that's got to stay cold. So good move. Oh, my little furry assistants, they just want to help me. And by help, I mean get in the way. Put the can opener away because I'm not going to be needing that again. Okay, so we're really just waiting for the timer to time out the 10 minutes, and then we'll put the beans in. Now again, I'm using canned beans because I know exactly how much I'm putting in, and I also know exactly, or not exactly, but and also they are already halved and trimmed. But you can, if you want to use fresh, you can use fresh green beans, or you can use frozen green beans. You could probably also substitute other vegetables if you want. Again, I'm just going with what the recipe calls for, number one, because I want to follow the recipe for this video. Number two, I happen to like the green beans in here, so it's just kind of my personal preference. It's kind of the same thing with the Italian dressing. I like the Italian dressing with this, so that's why I used it. Take another look. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay, so that is looking nice and good. I'm going to get a plate out because I'm going to need that relatively soon. And I don't want to use the plate that the chicken was sitting on because it was raw chicken sitting on a plate. And one of the nice things about this meal is that basically, aside from what you're using to measure everything out and what you're using to cook with, this skillet, this pan, is really all you're getting dirty. You're not getting a serving dish dirty. You're not getting multiple pans dirty. It's all contained in one thing. It's just the flipper the spoon and the measuring stuff. That's really, and if you are taking meat out of a freezer and you're just separating it like 2 or 3 pieces, whatever you have on the plate for whatever plate you used while it was defrosting, that's all, and then your dinner plates, that's all you're going to have to wash or take care of cleaning wise. It's relatively a small mess, which is a nice thing because it's not so much the cooking that bothers me, it's the cleaning up after the cooking. And this is a really easy cleanup. It's not a lot. You could actually, while you're waiting on stuff, if you've got all your prep work done beforehand, like all your measuring and whatnot, kind of clean up the stuff that you know you're not going to use anymore and take care of that. So you can kind of get that out of the way as well. Okay, so we're getting really close. We've only got about 2 minutes before we need to really take this off. And I know I'm checking this a lot. I just like to check to make sure everything's going good. And also I like the smell of it. It's got a really nice, take my word for it, it's got a really nice smell. It just makes you want to like really, let's finish this so we can eat it kind of thing. You'll see what I mean when you start cooking it. Okay, so we are just waiting on that chicken, on that timer. I should probably get the thermometer out because I'm going to want the meat thermometer. So I know when my chicken's done. And again, I will have this recipe in the description section so you can write down how much you're going to need and the different steps. And you can make substitutions as you want. Again, you can substitute the chicken for any other kind of meat, or just leave the chicken or leave the meat out altogether. You can substitute the dressing for wine or oil with herbs if you want. Just make sure if you're using the oil and if you're using the wine, you're using a wine that you like, that you would drink, and that's a wine that's going to complement the meat. You don't want to use a red wine with white meat. It's just, traditionally you want to use a white wine with white meat and a red wine with red meat. And if you're substituting the chicken for another kind of meat or leaving it all together, leaving the meat out altogether, you're going to want to make sure you use the appropriate broth. So if you're cooking pork, you're going to want to use a pork broth. If you're cooking beef, you're going to want to use a beef broth. If you're cooking shrimp, or you're leaving the meat out altogether, well, if you're cooking shrimp, I would recommend just using a vegetable broth because I don't think they really have a seafood broth. And if you're leaving the meat out altogether, you're going to want to beef. And there is my timer. It doesn't usually go off. So we're going to mix in the green beans. And I'm going to do 1 can at a time because it makes it a little easier to stir. Sorry, my cats are just crazy. Guys, knock it off! My cats, they're just nuts. I apologize for the screeching and the screaming that they'll probably be doing through the remainder of this video. Okay, so we're gonna mix in the other can. Yeah, we got a new kitten back in July of 2018. And my 2 older cats, Chloe and Susie, just do not like their new baby sister, Ahsoka. And she loves them. She loves to play with them. So they've got kind of a love-hate relationship. She loves them, they hate her. So you probably will hear a lot of hissing and screaming in the background, and I apologize for that. Okay, so we've got the beans in there, and we are going to turn up the heat, put the lid back on, and we're going to let that cook for 5 minutes or until the chicken is thoroughly cooked through, and that'll be at about 170 degrees. If you're at 169, you're going to want to let it get up at least 1 more degree. If you're at 171 or higher, that's fine. You just want to make sure that meat's cooked through. Now for pork, you're going to want to have it at 100 170 as well. Actually, this thermometer says 180, so I may wait till it's at 180. For pork, you're gonna want pork, lamb, or veal. You're gonna want to have it at 170. And also for beef, well, which basically means it's cooked, but it's still a little red in the center. For beef, medium well, or ham, you're gonna want to have it cooked. Well, you're probably not gonna substitute ham. For beef, medium well, which means it's red, it's a little pink in the middle, you're going to want it at about 160. Oh, excuse me, well is when it's like green all the way through. And rare, I don't know what, it doesn't say rare on here. So we're going to let that cook, and while it's cooking, I'm going to get the rice and the almonds ready. Okay, so you're going to want a cup and a half of Minuet rice uncooked. Now, again, if you added to the broth mixture, however much you added to the broth mixture, you're going to want to add to the rice. Same thing with however much you subtracted from the broth mixture, you're going to want to subtract from the rice. Because the rice is going to soak up that liquid. So you want the rice and the broth to be proportional. Now, I'm using white rice. You can use brown rice if you want. You just don't want to use flavored rice like long grain wild rice, mushroom rice, teriyaki rice, Spanish rice. You don't want to use any flavored rice at all. You just want, because you're going to get flavor from the broth in the rice. So you want to use white or brown, plain white or plain brown Minuet rice. So because I put a cup and a half of broth in there, I'm going to put a cup and a half of the rice in there. Now, I don't know where my cup measuring, my 1 cup dry measuring cup went to. So I'm going to use a half a cup measuring cup for the rice, and I'm going to put 3 of these in there. Actually works out pretty well because I can monitor what I can make it very evenly spaced in there. I'm not dumping a whole bunch of rice in. Now the almonds, you're going to want 1/4 dry cup of almonds. Now make sure it's the dry cup, not the wet cup. Now again, I don't know where my 1/4 measuring cup went. These are kind of old measuring things. We've had them for years, since I was a little kid. So I'm going to use an eighth of a cup, which means I'm only going to need 2 of these. So I'm going to put 2/8 of a cup of sliced almonds in there. And you can find sliced almonds in your bakery section at your local grocery store. That's where they would be in the bakery section. Okay, the timer says it's getting pretty close, so I'm going to check with my thermometer and see what it says my chicken's at. Okay, it says it's at 100 well, it's still going. Like I said, the recipe says 170. This says 180, so I'm going to go at 180. I'm going to go by what the directions on my thermometer says. Because even though the recipe says 170, it's not going to hurt the chicken or me to have it go to 180. So my thermometer says it's at 180. Again, my thermometer's pretty old. It's kind of falling apart a little bit, so it could be a little outdated on the temperature thing. But again, like I said, just because it's a little outdated, it says 180 where the recipe says 170, it's not going to kill me to have it to wait till it's at 170. Okay, so now we're going to put in the rice. Okay, we're going to remove this from the heat. So I'm just going to turn it off because we're not going to need the heat anymore. And we're going to want to take the chicken out. So I've got a nice clean plate right here to take the chicken out. And we're going to put that aside. And we're going to add in the rice. I'm going to do 1/2 cup of rice. Get that in there and mix that up with the broth really good. This is why I like using the half cup, because I'm not putting a whole cup in there all at once. I can just kind of mix it up really good. Just a scooch. And the 1/8 of a cup of almonds. Again, that's why I like using the 1/8 of a cup, because I'm just putting a little bit in there. And then I can mix it in. And then we're going to want to do another half cup. And I'm going to pour this over the thing, so if I spill, it's spilling in the skillet. You always want to make sure you pour stuff over a sink or the pan if you're going all the way to the top. So we're going to mix that in. And that's basically just so if you spill, you're spilling it in a confined area, you're spilling it in the sink, or you're spilling it in the cooking pan. You're not spilling it on the floor or anything. You're going to mix that in real good. Okay, I'm going to put the almonds in there. Another 1/8 of a cup of almonds. Make sure you're reading your measuring cups right, because you don't want to use 3/4 of a cup of almonds for this, because then you'll have like way too much almonds. So, but if you like almonds, feel free. I'm going to mix that in real good. But just make sure you're looking at the amount, like the size proportion on your measuring cups, particularly with the rice, because again, you want to make sure your rice, the amount of rice you're putting in is proportionate to the amount of broth you put in, because the rice is going to soak up the broth. We're going to mix that in real good. I want to make sure you get all the rice and almonds down from the side so they can soak up that broth really good. Okay, I'm just going to cover that. And we are going to want to let that stand for about 5 minutes, give or take. It depends on how much broth you put in there. If you put in less than 1.5 cups of broth, it's not going to take as long. If you put in more, it's going to take a little bit longer. So roughly about 5 minutes. You're going to want to check it every once in a while just to make sure it's soaking up that broth really, really good. Okay, so we're going to put these in here. And we're going to put the almonds away, and I'll put the rice away once this is done. I want to rinse this off real good. I don't want to put it in the dishwasher or submerge it in the sink because it's electronic, but I do want it to be clean. Okay, so that's in there. Put it back on this little saver.